Kia ora and welcome to Muffin Talk. Muffin Talk is a weekly radio program to which I invite guests to talk about their work and their passion for issues on community programs, social justice, ecumenism, interfaith relations, Bible studies, or the Catholic Church. Now in New Zealand, we are approaching the annual week of prayer for Christian unity, which goes from the 29th of May to the 5th of June this year. And the topic this year is given by the Middle East Council of Churches based in Beirut, Lebanon. They were entrusted with the task of choosing the theme and preparing texts for the Week of Prayer 2022. They chose the theme, and the theme is, "We have seen his star in the east and have come to pay homage to him." A quote from Matthew 2:2. Their work was then adapted for Aotearoa New Zealand on behalf of the Catholic Bishops' Committee for Ecumenism. But what is this Week of Prayer for Christian Unity? An occasion that is celebrated at different times in the Northern and the Southern Hemisphere. A few years ago, I interviewed Pat Lythe, and when she came as a guest to Muffin Talk, she explained what it was about. Pat at the time was employed by the Catholic Diocese of Auckland and has since retired. She has been involved in ecumenism for many years, and in this interview, I've been asking her about this special prayer for Christian unity. So here it goes.
And my guest today is Pat Lythe. Pat, a warm welcome and hi to our radio program.
Thank you, Beata. Nice to be here.
Pat, can you tell us more about this special week?
It's actually the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity, and it started with a group of people in the States who wanted to start to pray for Christian unity, and eventually it got taken on by the World Council of Churches, and the World Council of Churches started to promote it, and after the Vatican Council, the Pontifical Council for the Promotion of Christian Unity became a partner with the World Council of Churches, and they took on the organisation of the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity. Now, in the Southern Hemisphere, those dates don't work because everybody out here is on holiday. So mostly it's celebrated the week before Pentecost and finishes on Pentecost Sunday, which is the birthday of the church, so it's an appropriate day for it.
Yeah.
And so in New Zealand, we've always held it in that week.
And who organised it? You say the World Council of Christians?
The World Council of Churches and the Pontifical Council for Promotion of Christian Unity, the two bodies oversee it. But in the last 30 years, they have delegated one particular country to actually come up with the theme. So I don't know how they choose the country, but anyway, a country chooses a theme, and usually it's relevant to its own history or its own celebrations or a significant thing in that life, where every country makes its own choice.
And when the country makes the choice, when a country is chosen, or maybe they apply for being the next country, and then they would also decide on the theme? Or
yes, they do. They decide on the theme. It's always based on a scriptural text, and so
it's like social justice is involved in it.
That usually happens as well. So part of the World Week of Prayer for Christian Unity, part of the preparation is not only the theological and the spiritual preparation, but also the background to why it's chosen and what countries have chosen it and what the history is. So it's actually a great learning opportunity for people to hear about different countries, different ecumenical journeys, different aspects of Christianity.
And when you say that the theme is chosen by that country, and when it goes worldwide, do they give like an input? So this is why we chose the topic, and then every country makes its own resources, or are there resources also done centralized?
The country that is chosen gets together and plans it pretty basically, and then sends it to a group of the World Council of Churches and the Pontifical Council. There's 4 people, I think, 2 from each, and they edit it, and then it is sent out. But all countries are told to adapt it to their own circumstances. So, for example, in New Zealand, we would use some New Zealand hymns and some Maori hymns and some Maori greetings and things like that. So every country's encouraged to adapt it to its own context.
But then again, it's per country, so all the Christians in that country have the same resources.
Yes, all the Christians in the world have the same resources. So it's sent out to a central place, like the New Zealand Catholic Bishops' Conference receives it and sends it to its Committee on Ecumenism, and they send it out to the diocese. They adapt it a wee bit. They sort of suggest what hymns you might like to sing, or some Maori prayers perhaps in it. But each group that picks it up can adapt it even more so. Yeah. So what happens in New Zealand is that the commission, somebody in the commission writes those things and sends it out about February when people are back at work in the church in New Zealand. And in Auckland, the Diocesan Commission for Ecumenism and Interfaith Relations will organise one central service, and that can be in all sorts of places. It's been at St Matthew's in the city, it's been at St Ben's, it's been at St Luke's.
In Parnell.
Yes, in Parnell. It's been at the Lutheran place, it's been in different places. So, but also places like Takapuna, East Coast Bays, Wellsford, Pukekohe, all sorts of places do it themselves, and they'll have a meeting in one of their churches. Depends on how interested the Ministers' Association in a particular suburb or small town is. The rural towns tend to be more ecumenical than the city suburbs, but some of the suburbs are really good. Takapuna, for example, is one that's really good.
But if a place that's chosen is on the North Shore, for example, it's more likely that you have other groups doing it in the south of Auckland.
Yep. The main one can be anywhere in Auckland, and you don't get a lot of people, 50, 60, that's about it. But it's that's for the main one. But the suburban ones get more people as well. But not only that, so quite often what happens is, for example, in Takapuna, they have morning prayer in a different church each morning of that week. So, and those resources are part of the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity resources. And also we send out those resources to parishes, and they can print the prayers in their bulletins, and they can be said at Mass, even if it's not an ecumenical service, because the prayers are for unity.
Yeah. For those of you who just tuned in, you are listening to Muffin Talk with Beate. We are on air every Friday morning at 8:40 a.m. on Planet FM 104.6. If you miss any of our programs, please check out www.planetaudio.org.nz/Muffin Talk. My visitor today is Pat Lythe, and we were talking about the week for prayer for Christian unity. So it's going to happen in May. You say in May. Yes. in New Zealand.
Yes.
And if there are 2 weeks of Christian unity in this way, the one in the southern hemisphere and the one in the northern hemisphere. Has there been an attempt to shift it all to 1 week?
No, because it doesn't work.
Because I understand what you said about New Zealand not having the chance to do it.
So South America and Australia and all the Southern Hemisphere countries.
But it could be all around the celebration of the Holy Spirit.
It could be. That has been problematic, though, in that lots of parishes have a huge celebration on the Feast of the Holy Spirit for themselves, just to celebrate the Holy Spirit. So everybody wears red, and there's feasts, and there's, people pray in different tongues. And so to add the ecumenical part of it makes it a bit complicated. So Pentecost is not actually necessarily the best time to celebrate an ecumenical thing. The week before is good, but to actually finish on Pentecost Sunday hasn't actually worked particularly well. Normally it's in the afternoon. Everybody's exhausted from what they'd been doing in their own parishes in the morning, and so that's why there's not a big take-up. Yeah.
But is there a big gap between the 2 weeks of Christian unity, or prayer for Christian unity? Is there an exchange of experience?
No. Actually, I've never seen any comments on what happens in the Northern Hemisphere. It's interesting.
Oh, Because I was thinking, if it's happening a few months beforehand, they could say, "Oh well, this is the result, or this is the feedback that we've received, or don't do this." Or
yes, that would be interesting. Yeah, it would be interesting. I guess we ought to ask that question.
I have to ask the question in a different way.
I think it's quite a good idea to have two, because it means we're continually praying for Christian unity rather than just once a year. But there are other opportunities as well. There's the World Day of Prayer, which is always the first Friday of March, which is organised by women's groups, and it just happens. Women's groups all over, Christian women's groups all over New Zealand just organise it. So it's the first Friday in March always. And then there's a week of prayer for peace, which is in November, I think, which is not nearly as well publicised as the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity. So there are things happening all the time, but this one is the major one in the world anyway.
Do you think that this Week of Prayer for Christian Unity needs more support by churches or by different church groups?
Ecumenism has fallen down the agenda of many church groups in New Zealand for two reasons. One, secularization is we've lost a lot of people from our churches, or we've lost a lot of people who want to do anything extra apart from their one going to church on Sunday, so that they're not into anything extra. So that's one reason. Secularisation is one reason. That means, people are working at weekends, sports at weekends, things like that. But the other thing that's impacting on it is the interfaith and the growth of a whole lot of new faiths in New Zealand, which is fantastic, Buddhism and all of those new faiths that we've got. And that's become the flavour of the month, if you like. So people who want to do work at relationships are actually going into the interfaith one rather than the ecumenical one, because the ecumenical one seems to have got stuck. We seem to have done lots of things together and we don't seem to be able to get any further.
But I think that the ecumenical part is needed if you want to go to the interfaith.
Yes.
Because if interfaith groups invite Christians, if they don't know about the different Christian denominations, then they would just take one Christian, and if that Christian doesn't know about other Christian denominations, how can this person represent Christians?
I agree. But that's just what has happened. Yeah.
And do you think that also with the immigrants coming from maybe countries where there's one dominating denomination that has an impact?
Yes.
Because I was just thinking, you mentioned that it was the United States where it started. And in the United States, you had a big melting pot of people from different religions, and mainly Christian religions in the beginning, coming all together in the country. And so they were maybe curious in how can we get along better. And with all the Pentecostal movement starting, wasn't it in the beginning of the 20th century when this week was initiated? When was it?
1928. That was when the first ecumenical initiative started as well. When we started to get together again, having separated. Yeah. But we've got to the stage of doing lots of things together and of accepting lots of things, like we accept one another's baptisms. But the two sticking points are, how do we view Eucharist and ordination? So those are the two sticking points. And there's another sticking point now, which is causing quite a bit of division among the churches themselves, and that's how to deal with the gender issue. So ecumenism has sort of got stuck. We keep at the relationships, but we don't seem to be able to progress it.
But if you're not in if you're in a public school, would you learn anything about other denominations in general? When I think back in Germany, we had the Lutherans and the Catholic, and there were some other groups, but they were really minor. So as a Catholic, you would learn something about the Lutherans, and the Lutheran would learn something about the Catholics. And here in New Zealand, you don't have the really two big churches. There are so many churches.
There are four big ones.
Do you really learn of the other ones?
Not unless your social studies teacher takes that as a topic. There are options for that to happen. It doesn't happen in most schools. It's maybe part of the history, but a very small part. Yep.
So in a way, you have to create an awareness in the beginning so that people, when they grow up, that they already know a little bit about the different denominations.
Yeah.
Because if you come from a country that is mainly Catholic, for example, and they have never met a Methodist, they don't know what is the difference.
No, that's right. And of course, the Filipinos come from a country that's mainly Catholic, and that's difficult for them, although they actually have a reasonable understanding of the other faiths. It's more difficult, I think, for people who are Muslim or Sikh to understand the difference between the Christian. But you and I were both at a meeting recently with Indian people from India who talked about all the different religions in India.
Yes.
So we didn't know. I didn't know that. Didn't know most of that. So there's a whole lot of things we don't know.
Yeah.
Whereas the Week of Prayer for Christian Unity, when they choose a country, that helps to actually spread that particular part of the information. But I've been recently, in September last year, went to a conference in Canberra called Receptive Ecumenism, and that's the way they're trying to focus ecumenism now, which means we listen to one another's stories to find something that might enrich our own faith, not to criticise and not necessarily to take on board the doctrine that's behind it, but maybe there's something in that faith, in that religion, that would enrich ours. And so it's like sharing gifts. So that's what the reception part is. And at that conference, there was a group from Sweden, from the Swedish Council of Churches, and there are 4 major groups of churches in Sweden: Catholic, Lutheran, Orthodox and Reformed. And they decided that they would really work hard at this receptive ecumenism. And so what they did over 18 months, they planned 4 weekends, and each weekend was hosted by one of the groups at one of their institutions, one of their retreat places, and they went there and they learned about the prayer style of that particular church, but they also looked at questions and they engaged in really deep conversation. So that was the first weekend. The second weekend, they went to a place in the forest and they did the same thing, but they paired them off in different groups and sent them out into the forest to talk to each other in the middle of creation, so that it wasn't just in a building, it was actually in the forest. And the third weekend, a different group again, they went to a place where there was a lake, and they went out in kayaks on the lake in pairs to talk about their own particular faith. And then the last weekend, they debriefed about it all, and they came to this conference and they talked to the conference people there, and they were all absolutely wowed by that experience, by the intensity of the experience and the amount of time they'd spent and the getting to know each other and the relationships. So it seemed to me to be something that I'd like to, promote here at some stage.
Well, we started with an exchange of songs, or of hymns.
We did. I'm not sure whether that's gone very far. We've actually exchanged our hymns, but we actually haven't sung them in different places.
But on the other hand, if you look at some of the traditional Catholic hymns, they were actually written by Lutherans.
That's right.
So
that's right.
It merged, and who knows about it if you don't look at the fine print.
And most of the major hymns were written by Methodists anyway. Yeah. Yes. By Wesley.
Especially the English ones.
Yes, that's right, exactly. Yes.
So there's a kind of ecumenism, but it has merged so much that you don't realize it anymore.
That's right. Which is great. I mean, it's a huge change from 60 years ago, when we weren't Catholics, weren't allowed to talk to anybody else, weren't allowed to go to anybody others. It's a huge change. So although I'm sad that we're not moving as fast as we could, we have moved a hell of a long way. And 50 years is not long in the history of the churches.
But also, the groups get to know each other, but then there are evangelical groups who might not even take part of it. And you mentioned earlier the secularization in the country. So if you don't know much about your own religion, even if you're baptized maybe, then you also might get mixed up and don't know
True.
What do we really believe in?
True.
If there's nobody to give you guidance?
True. And one of the difficulties that's another aspect of the discussion in New Zealand, is that the evangelical, and I'm not sure that's the right descriptive, the Pentecostal churches don't tend to want to learn from one another. They tend to want to convert, which is what we used to do. That's not what ecumenism is all about. Ecumenism is about learning from one another and seeing what we can hold in common. And so that makes it difficult as well.
That's one of the problems that also in other countries exist, that you have the cooperation between the established churches,
yes,
but not the new sprouts.
That's right. And the new style churches are attractive to young people because they've got good music, good preaching, and that's it. And that's, that's half of what we have, but that's what attracts the young people. And so it's really difficult to say, okay, well, the rest of it's important as well, but we've forgotten. We just take it for granted that they know about what it is, and they don't.
And I think one of the challenges is also, in a way, you'd have to explain to young people the differences of
yes,
the church, and then
yes,
at the same time explain that we are all one.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and they say, well, why are you all different? Well, I don't know. I suppose it's like music groups. They're all different. You can't put them all together. They all have a different style. It's a different style, really. It's a different style of worship. We all believe in the creed, and we all share the baptism, but there are differences in the way we process it, really. Yep. And those are the things that are going to be sorted in the next 100 years, probably.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll be here to see it, but I think they'll get sorted.
But if there are committees and groups that come together and exchange their ideas,
yes,
and each one comes from a different area,
yes,
and with a different background, I think that's a good start.
Yes.
And as long as also the priests and the ministers are in favor of it, that people understand each other, because then it also makes it easier for a couple that is maybe not of the same denomination, and they might only know the information from 50 years ago from their parents or grandparents and think, oh, we don't even approach the church. But if they'd known about the cooperation,
yep,
it would be easier for them.
Yep, it's true. It's true. And now probably in the Auckland diocese, half of the clergy are from countries overseas countries, and not necessarily the same ecumenical cooperation happens in those countries. So we have an education process with them as well. And of course they're the leaders in their parishes, and they influence the way the people believe. So yes, it's interesting. And they have enough difficulty with getting to grips with the New Zealand culture, and quite often they don't go to ministers' associations because that's just an extra, that it's a bit too difficult for them at the beginning. So the ecumenism doesn't get started very quickly.
Are there many parishes in Auckland that have a convener for ecumenism on the parish council, for example?
No.
So that's another way we could start.
Well, it's down as an option.
Well, there's something that we'll have to work on, and hopefully some people will listen to the program and think about, well, we could start it. We could start something in the parish, and even if it's not a parish councillor, there could be a little group within the parish, and that's how it can grow. And most areas in Auckland have a wide range of different Christian denominations, so I think it's a way to reach out.
But we have a rest home in the parish that runs an ecumenical service once a fortnight, and a group from our parish runs that service once a fortnight. The priest doesn't have to be there because it's not a mass. That's something that happens in many parishes, actually many suburbs. Now where there's more and more retirement villages and rest homes, it's ideal.
And so that's another idea for anybody who's interested in getting involved. And they can go through the Muffin Talk, and we'll have it on Facebook.
Yes.
So if anybody's interested in getting involved in ecumenism.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Pat, for this interview, and thank you for having come to the program.
So far, my interview with Pat Lythe, which was recorded a few years ago. And what is coming up at Titiponamu Study and Joy? Tonight, Friday, the 20th of May, from 7 to 8:30. Brother Kieran will present the talk, Mary, Our Inspiration. He's talking about Mary, the mother of God, the cousin who visits Elizabeth in haste, the mother who acted in Cana and accompanied her son to the cross. So it will be a fascinating view on the real Mary. And then on Mondays, the 13th, the 20th, and the 27th of June, from 7 to 8:30, we'll have another presentation by Brother Kieran, and that will be St. Paul, the First Missionary. And if you'd like to register, or if you're interested in these events, there will be resources online. But please register at info@studyjoy.nz or go to the website at www.studyjoy.nz. Kia kaha, keep safe, and have a wonderful week.